Hi, I am Eddie Muller, and I am welcoming you to Club TCM, sponsored by City, for today's special event, Curating the Classics. We will be looking behind the scenes at how TCM is programmed, and this is a special event sponsored by City, the official card of the TCM Film Festival, and they have been since 2013, and we greatly appreciate their continued support. So to get us started today, we are really in luck because we have three people who are essential to the programming of Turner Classic Movies joining us today. And I want you to ask all of your questions. I know you're going to have a lot of them. So submit those questions via the chat feature on Zoom, and we'll see how many of those we can get in. So I'd like to start by introducing our panelists today. And we will begin with Charlie Tabish, who is the Senior Vice President of... I'm going to try to get this right, Charlie. Senior Vice President of Content Production of Programming, Production, and Content Strategy. Hi, Charlie.
Just say programming. It's so much easier. That's what I do.
Very good. You wear many hats, and we can't keep them all straight. So.
It all means programming.
Okay, very good. Also joining us today is Millie DeCherico. And she is the content manager for TCM. Good to see you, Millie. How are you today?
Good to see you too, Eddie. I'm good. How are you?
I am doing just fine, and we will, I hope, field some questions about Noir Alley because you work very closely with me in getting those shows on the air. So I'm hoping that we get some questions in that regard. And lastly, my old buddy that I just saw last night, Scott McGee. Scott, how are you? He is the Senior Director of Original Programming for TCM. Scott, how are you?
Hey there, tough guy. Yeah, I'm doing really good. I'm doing really, really well, Eddie. And seeing you 2 days in a row, it is a true delight.
Thank you. That was great fun last night. We had a very good time. I have to live up to the standard that you have set as the host. So I greatly appreciate it. And we'll be able to find out exactly what original programming means for TCM. And Scott also has the responsibilities for the cruise and the film festival programming as well as network stuff. So just bear that all in mind. So to get us off here and out of the gate, I just think it would be very helpful to our viewers for them to understand just what it is that each of you does at the network, what your specific responsibilities are. So, Charlie, you want to kick us off here and tell us exactly what the hell is it you do for TCM?
Well, I think like any job, there's a lot of miscellaneous stuff, but fundamentally, let's see, I decide what we want to license, what films or what product we want to license for the channel. I manage the budget, so decide how to spend the money that we're given by our company, and so how to allocate that to what product. I do oversee the programming for the channel and everything else, but of course rely heavily on people like Millie or Stephanie Thames, who isn't joining us tonight, and I also oversee Scott's production department. Again, he kind of takes care of that very well. And Angela Carone runs our podcast department, and I also oversee that again. Just great people in all those places. So I don't need to do too much there. And then listen to ideas from you and lots of other people on what you think we should do for programming. And once in a while have an idea of my own, but kind of let everyone do their thing and try to oversee it the best I can.
All right, very good. Millie, how about you? What is your role at TCM, and what are you responsible for?
So I mainly work on the contracts for the network, so making sure we're kind of fulfilling all of our contractual obligations with the distributors and the studios. I also program the weekends for the network, and I'm basically in charge of all of our franchises. So TCM Underground, Silent Sunday Nights, TCM Imports, and of course Noir Alley. I work with you a lot.
Indeed you do, and I appreciate it. And Scott, how about you? Explain to us what the original programming is on TCM.
So original programming is, it's the series of interstitials and short mini documentaries that fall in between the movies. Think of right now we've got the Body Images and Film piece airing. That's something that I commissioned from a freelance producer. The Blackface and Hollywood piece from last year that garnered a lot of attention. A lot of those pieces that support the programming, but also pieces that that play into the strategy of what programming and what TCM is trying to do, that helps support it. And so there's stuff that airs just for the month, but then there's also things that live on after that month is over. And in addition to that, to my day job, if you will, yes, I do work with Charlie and Stephanie in programming the festival, and I produce a lot of the events that go on at the festival. And then when I'm working on the cruise, I program that with Charlie and Stephanie's help. And so, yeah. And also the ancillary stuff, like doing stuff on camera from time to time. It's kind of a lot.
Okay. Hey, while you're at it, give a quick shout out to Stephanie, because she is not amongst this group, and I don't want people to think you just misidentified Millie. So give her a shout out.
Right, Stephanie Thames. Yeah, Charlie had mentioned her. She's an integral part. I mean, Charlie's been working with her for years.
That's right.
All right, very good. Before I start taking questions from the viewers, Charlie, you mentioned something that I think we should address, because it kind of cuts to the heart of most of the questions that I get about programming on TCM, and that has to do with the licensing of films, because a lot of people are under the misconception that TCM has a vast library of films that it owns. So can you just, as adroitly as possible, explain to people how this process actually works?
Yeah, that's a really important question, because I think it's not just people out there. I think people just sort of think that, oh, TCM, why didn't you play this movie, or you should play that movie? And by the way, those are often great suggestions to hear, but it doesn't mean we can necessarily get that movie. Even the films that are sort of in the core library that Warner Brothers controls, we have to license those from Warner Brothers. Now, it's true that we have much greater access to those, so we're much more likely to be able to get those films. But then we also have to do deals with Fox and Paramount and Universal and MGM and Sony to get their studio films or independent distributors. And sometimes the films we want are already tied up with other licenses. Sometimes they're too expensive for us. Sometimes there are rights issues. It does, just because something might make sense from a programming standpoint, it doesn't mean we can get that film. So we've tried over the years to put deals in place to give us broader access. Things like what we call pool deals, where we go to Sony or Universal and we say, we'll license these big films for a certain period of time, which is what's traditionally done in the industry. But in addition, let us take a certain number of films from your inventory for one play throughout the year, and that'll give us flexibility maybe to use a film for a special festival or something. But again, we have to get approval. We have to make sure those are available. It's not always cut and dried. And so and a lot of the more popular films are harder to get just because they're licensed elsewhere quite often, so or more expensive. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we have the broadest access of anybody, I think, clearly, without question, to classic films, but it doesn't mean we have everyone.
Right. Good. I mean, that's a good start, letting people know that it's not just, you walk into the vault and pull it out and air it. It's a lot more
That's
complex than that. Okay, I'm going to start
and
taking some questions.
I think it took you a little... No, I just remember when you came on from Noir Alley. I think that was a surprise to you, wasn't it? That we, a lot of things you would play at your festival that we couldn't necessarily get.
Correct, because there is a big difference between showing things theatrically and showing things for broadcast. Yeah. And so there were films that I had found that I was able to show in theaters that we just couldn't show on TCM, and I got up to speed on that pretty fast.
Yeah.
So here, we're going to take some questions from Jerry Lass. He wants to know, to any of these programmers, how does one get to be a programmer for TCM? Scott, how is it that you actually ended up in this position?
Attrition? No. I started at TCM in 2000 working in the on-air promotions department. And I worked as an on-air producer for, about 10 years or so. And then it took me about 10 years to prove to Charlie that I knew about movies. And so when the film festival time, when it came time to develop it, Charlie tapped me to help him program the festival at the very beginning. So it was sort of like getting called up from the minor leagues into the majors for me. And then that just sort of blossomed from there. So in a lot of ways it was luck, but I think in a lot of ways it also subscribes to the theory that, you take a job that you may not love, but that experience might turn into something more and get you closer to where you really want to be.
Fantastic. And Millie, you have a very interesting backstory to how you kind of came to film programming. Can you share that?
Sure. So I went to film school, like a lot of people at TCM did, and I worked in radio for a couple of years, and I was actually a DJ for a while, which I always tell people, being a DJ, I think prepared me to work in the programming department at TCM. There's similar skill sets there. But I was pretty young when I came to TCM, and I always say I was really lucky. Because everybody wants a job in programming. And so I'm sure there was a lot of other people who wanted the job. And I actually started as the viewer relations coordinator for the network. So I answered all the mail. And this was kind of before, it wasn't like pre-internet, but I don't think we had social media. We had our message boards, but a lot of people were still calling and writing mail. And I did that for a while. And eventually Charlie and Stephanie kind of, taught me the ins and outs of programming the network. So
you literally, like an old Hollywood story, you worked your way up from the mailroom. I think that's
sure
fantastic.
Did. Yep.
That's great. And Charlie, it's funny, I have no idea how you got into this, because it seems to me you've just always been there. You were like born into it. But what is the story?
Well, I've been there a long time, but definitely like Scott and Millie, a lot of luck involved, certainly. I started out of college as a temp at a local station in LA called the Z Channel, which I think some people might remember. It was pretty famous within the LA world, and it was the dying days of Z Channel. And to Scott's point, you just take whatever job you can get. And I took my job, and I was a log builder, building in the pieces between the movies and timing them out. And then they went out of business, and they turned into Sports Channel, and I was an assistant to the ad salesperson at Sports Channel, and then I got a job at Stars Encore in Denver, and then I got the job at TCM. So it's just a matter of getting your foot in the door, I think, and really going for what you want. I knew I wanted to be in programming the whole time, even when I wasn't. That's where I wanted to be, and I just made sure everyone knew it, and then when the opportunity came, I took it. Okay.
And I know that Jerry's question here was really sort of not how you guys got into it, but how does anyone plan to get a job in, which is, I get asked this all the time because I'm in film preservation and restoration, and they say, how do you get involved in that? And there is no set answers. So, just what would be your advice, Charlie, if somebody was saying, I would really love to be a film programmer? What would you say?
I would say be politely persistent and just letting people know that you're out there every once in a while. Hey, don't forget about me, sending a resume or setting up a call or something. And knowing that it's, there's not a lot of turnover. It's hard to do. It's hard to get in. But sometimes something opens up, and all of a sudden maybe the person that you talked to most recently or the last couple of people are like, wow, hey, that was a great conversation, and you might think to reach out to them and see if, encourage them to apply. It really is luck. I don't want to, sell it as something easy, but I think, and again, to the earlier point, take whatever you can in the company, and if you can get any job in the company, take it. And do your best, and again, let people know what you ultimately want to do, and they'll help you get there if you're good.
Can I add on to that, Eddie?
Thank you for that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I would say that, I would say that you need to do your homework, which is to say you need to have a command of the knowledge of movie history, so that whoever you're talking to, they know that they can take you seriously, and that you are legit. There's a young man named Shane Fleming who was a guest programmer on TCM, a fan programmer when he was a kid, and Shane he's become actually an authority in a lot of ways on silent film, and anybody who can talk to Shane would know it immediately. Now, I don't know if Shane wants to be a film programmer, but if he wanted to, I think anybody could take him seriously and listen to him. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of doing your homework and also being able to communicate, because it's a lot more than just having the film knowledge, but it's also being able to talk to people and to maintain professional and personal relationships in the programming world, because it's a very small community in a lot of ways, the programming world. So you kind of have to know other people and know how to reach out when you need to.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And it's funny, I don't really program for TCM. I give suggestions and things. But as somebody who learned this totally on the job in terms of theatrical programming, I knew nothing about it. And I apprenticed with a woman in San Francisco named Anita Manga, who was the programmer for the Castro Theater. And she really taught me the ins and outs of how it works. I just thought it was fun, like playing with baseball cards or something, like mixing and matching to build a team. Wouldn't it be fun if we showed this with that? I mean, I was the kind of programmer who would say, I want to show a double bill of I Wake Up Screaming and In a Lonely Place, just so I can look at the marquee and have it say, I Wake Up Screaming in a Lonely Place. that was like my initial approach to programming. But then, thanks to Anita, I learned like how you actually have to book the films, and man, Scott, you are so right that you have to be able to communicate, because I have found that the single most important aspect of all of this is getting a phone call returned. To me, that was the whole key to becoming a programmer, was if you call and ask something, will they return your phone calls? So you have to be a good communicator in order to achieve that. So anyway, moving on. Dominique asks, how do you find the balance between decades of classic films that we show? Because everything differs so much. And I guess this question does kind of come down to, how are we now defining classics? Because we're showing stuff from the 80s and 90s even, as well as, from the silence on. So how do you maintain the balance? Is that something you think about? Charlie?
Definitely something we think about. I think, the TCM core really comes from that library that Ted Turner bought, which, was the original MGM and RKO and Warner Brothers pre-1948 films. And then we've licensed subsequently films beyond that. But for TCM, we're not opposed to newer movies at all. When we can get them, we love to play them, especially when they make sense in the context. For example, this month, this incredible body image and film festival that Millie, her idea and she programmed, and the piece that Scott referenced earlier that he produced. We licensed films like Precious and Muriel's Wedding for that. I mean, those are great and key and really important to play. Hairspray in the context of a festival like that. But at the end of the day, partly because of the core library that we have greater access to, and partly because the licensing rights and availability for newer films is different, we're going to skew a little bit older maybe. But for example, on HBO Max, the TCM hub would be much more contemporary, because they have access to a lot more contemporary classics, and those are just as much. Or when you come to the film festival, if you come to our live festival or our virtual festival, you'll see more contemporary classics. We're about the history of movies, right? We're about the history of film, great film, and that includes silent films for sure, and that includes more recent films for sure. And whatever we can do to just get that right mix, we'll do. And we don't think one era is the best. Or, well, I'm sure we all have our preferences, but we don't sort of dismiss any particular era of filmmaking. And I think we just want to be the best representation of film history that we can.
Excellent. And I think you just partially answered a question that we had from this fella, Joe Costa, who was asking about what the new relationship with HBO Max means in terms of accessibility to films that you might not have had otherwise. I assume you see it as a positive thing.
Yeah, I mean, the rights are very different. So a great example is this particular festival, which was really our chance to really dive in and work with them really closely on kind of that TCM curatorial approach, which was fun because that did give us access to a different set of movies that, of course, we were including older, more traditional studio classics, but, newer classics like Hunger or Misery or Inner Space and films that were Goodfellas, films that we can play that are harder for us to get on linear TCM. And I think the two combined is actually a really great kind of representation of that history that I just talked about. So that's a really good, it really is a great complement, I think, on HBO Max to what we're doing on TCM.
Terrific. Stephanie Krebs asks, what was the most sought after film that was the most difficult one to get for licensing, and why, and how did you finally get it? I guess this is for you, Charlie, since you would be.
Yeah, I got to take it. I mean, so the ones that we got finally, I can say that, or a couple like MGM. We finally got some Bond movies, I remember, because they owed us a favor, and so we were able to get some Sean Connery Bonds and make Sean Connery our Star of the Month. And then similar thing happened with The Godfather from Paramount, where it just became available. Miraculously, they called us. We could get it for 1 month, and Godfather 1 and 2, and we were able to get them in one August. That again, because it's very popular, very expensive. The availability is tough. And we had enough money in the budget to license them for that 1 month, and so I guess those are examples of those ones that we really wanted, and ultimately we got, and that happens every so often. And then of course there are some that we haven't yet gotten. So.
Okay, and Julia Ricci wants to know, how does the 31 Days of Oscar program come together? How do you decide on the theme each year? So I don't know who's responsible for that, but how does that work exactly?
Sorry.
Everybody chuckles kind of wryly.
Well, I don't. Stephanie does the 31 Days of Oscar programming each year, and she'll come up with the approach that we take. There are a lot of different things we've done over the years. I used to do them, and maybe, I don't know, several years ago as Stephanie took over, and this year it's A to Z. We've done Oscar goes, the life of Oscar and him and Oscar in different circumstances. We've done 36 degrees of Oscar, which each movie connecting to another. Sometimes we go by just the awards categories. I think it's just, combination of creatively what's interesting and what movies we have to work with that year, that what makes sense for us.
Yeah.
I will say I don't have much to do with 31 Days of Oscar, but, we could do what Eddie said earlier about I wake up screaming in a lonely place. Maybe that's something we could do someday with Oscar. Have each title, one after the other, complete its own sentence.
That's
it's
fun.
a funny thing because it's interesting. One thing that I really noticed that was different when I came over from theatrical programming to television programming is I always think in terms of double bills when I'm programming theatrically, because that's kind of become my thing at the Noir City festivals. So I could just have fun with it and program A Place in the Sun with Escape in the Fog, and that would be my A and B double bill, And but it's tougher when you're programming 24 hours a day. It's hard to establish those links, between the films. But I have a question for Millie from Aaron. Is there a series that has been your favorite that you've programmed so far?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, honestly, well, Charlie mentioned body image in film. That was, I know that's happening as we speak. That one was really important to me. I was really happy when I got the chance to do that. But for the most part, I love, like when we do Summer of Darkness, I think that's like a really great fun thing when we have things that are over the course of a couple months. I love the women filmmakers. Anytime we do a women filmmakers, but yeah, for me personally, I mean, like for example, to your earlier point, Eddie, about trying to come up with ideas to link movies. Sometimes it is like plays on words. Like I came up with movie Roberts because I was like, oh, we have all these movies and there are stars in them that are named Robert, and it just happened to coincide with Robert Osborne's birthday, so it kind of all worked out like that. But sometimes it is like something fun.
I want to add to that, Millie. One movie Roberts simultaneously this year came both from you and from Toya Murray, who's also on staff. Coincidentally, I just want to give her credit too. Independently, you guys had that same idea. And then, can you talk a little bit about Underground? Do you mind? Because that's really you. That's your heart and soul. I feel like your vision that playing out there.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. Underground is our like late night cult movie franchise. We're actually doing a little fun thing later today. We're going to introduce Grease 2 a little bit earlier than when we're usually on, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, it's kind of just been this, it's a repository for kind of cult film, bizarre film, anything that's kind of off-kilter. We like to say that this is kind of stuff that comes on after normal TCM goes off the air. So yeah, we've played some interesting films, but yeah, it's been on for about 15 years. It's kind of hard to believe that we've been doing it for this long, but it's fun to program.
Okay, here we go. Here's a good question from Susan Nelson. She asks, what impact does it have on the programmers when you get social media criticism for programming things that might be seen as political or controversial? Charlie, you know this question was coming.
Well, you want to go first, Scott, and go. I mean, if you guys have, I'm sure you guys have thoughts on it. I do too, but I'd love to hear from you guys.
Well, I mean, I would say that a lot of the things that we air rarely have a political bent to them. Sometimes it's coincidental. I mean, we got a lot of when the election of the last president was inaugurated, we had played A Face in the Crowd that same day, and a lot of people ascribed some sort of political meaning to it, but it wasn't. It was just Patricia Neal's birthday, and in a lot of but outside of coincidences, I mean, when we do things like Reframed and other things that look at film history in a critical light, and when I say critical, I don't mean critical in the bad sense, but in looking at it and seeing how the history has shaped where we are today, and looking at the film, warts and all, and just taking an honest look at it. And I think we all realize that some people just want to watch a good movie, but there's also, I think, a lot to learn from these films because they are living, breathing documents that speak to us today. And so I don't think it has really much to do with politics. It's just a matter of looking at what it means to us from an objective viewpoint.
If I can just jump on that thought before everybody else, I couldn't agree with you more, Scott, that it seems that one thing that bothers me about social media is how it doesn't think very deeply sometimes. And so you use a word like critical and people read it as negative. Would you consider the term critical care to be negative care? No, it's critical care. It means you're applying every asset you have and all of your critical thinking to it, as opposed to just, hey, I just want to kill a couple of hours watching a movie. You're delving into it more deeply, which is certainly not a negative thing. Your thoughts?
Yeah,
Charlie?
and I think I think we what we're doing today is really not any different than what we've always done.
Yeah, and by the way, back to the coincidence, or back to the Face in the Crowd day on the inauguration day. we do the schedule months in advance at times, but it was before the election even that we had Kisses for My President program that day because we assumed Hillary was going to win, and that's about the first woman president. So sometimes we swing and miss too. I love getting political, and I love it when we're provocative. But I also, we've done ideology. The Nation at the same time to talk about films. We've had. Jonah Goldberg came on last time to talk about, and I forget who his liberal counterpart was. We had John McCain and Joe Biden both come on and host movies on TCM. I will say I think sometimes you got to shut off the complaints which you get like, oh, leave me alone, whatever, because look, you're going to get plenty of time to see films without that. Without that provocation. But sometimes it's good to be a little provocative. But I also think it's also good to keep your antenna open or out there for things that might make sense, like criticism or feedback that might be like, oh, that's worth paying attention to. 95% of the complaints might be bullshit, but maybe a few of them are something you might go, oh, that's something we really should consider and think about. And I think. So it's a balance between, not letting it get you down, but also being able to look at it somewhat objectively.
Which we do read the mail. We do read the mail. I mean, Millie mentioned the mail from viewers earlier, but we get a report from all the feedback that comes in through our viewer mail portal, and we do read it, and so we do pay attention to it. We don't necessarily digest it all, but we do pay attention.
Yeah, interesting note about programming in advance. It's wonderful that the fans are so passionate and that they get involved to the degree where they're giving suggestions. And I get a lot of really good suggestions for things to program on Noir Alley. But I think people do need to understand that shows are programmed far in advance. And, our introductions are recorded in advance. A fellow emailed me the other day and said, I've got the perfect movie for you to show the week after you show Touch of Evil. Well, I'm showing Touch of Evil this Saturday, right? Or next Saturday. And it's like, no, that the following week's show is long since scheduled and the introduction is long since recorded. So it's not really like we can react so swiftly to what's going on in the culture. Hey, Millie, I just want to throw this out to you really quick. The chat is percolating here with people saying that TCM Underground needs a host, and you are being championed as that host. So Charlie is sitting right there in that square, and you're there in that square. Maybe we should figure out how to make that happen.
Not our department. We've got a great talent team. We've got a great production team. Our general manager would be. So we're going to punt on this one. No.
I'm not doing it alone. If I don't want to do it alone, if the other Slumber Ground people want to host with me, that's fine. But that's all I have to say about the matter.
It is sort of like a slumber party, So it would be like a good group thing to do. So anyway, we'll take that all under advisement. Seth Shire says this to everyone. Love the original interstitial programming, especially the body image and blackface pieces. How do you find the quirky pre-existing material that is programmed so well to go with the features and the themes, like the newsreels and the interviews and all that? And I'm going to jump on the tail end of that question to say, it always amuses me when I am able to watch Noir Alley and then I see a follow-up newsreel or travel log or something that ties in to the movie. I have nothing to do with that. So it always amuses me that, wow, somebody is really paying attention. So
and that's
how does
Ben
that work?
Cheeves. Ben Cheeves does an amazing job. He's just incredible. And I notice that all the time. I'm watching at home and I see the connection. I'm like, God, that guy's good. He's on top of it. So yeah, he's got this incredible ability to find these things that we have access to this huge library, which is really unique. That's one of the things, not just the films that we have access to, but just the library of extra material is immense, and that helps us out, and he knows what to choose.
Fabulous. Hey, Laura Anhalt wants to know who thinks of the themes, the monthly and daily themes. How do those get conjured up, and who's responsible for saying yes or no? Whoever wants to answer that.
Millie, you want to take that one?
Sure. I'll say, to start, the programming department gets together every year and sort of has a day-long pitch fest where we kind of come up with the stars of the month and the different sort of spotlights for every month of the next year. And everybody pitches those in the department. We also get tons and tons of pitches from outside of the department, like at the network, from talent, from viewers. So there's a lot of ideas kind of in the hopper. And then from that point, we kind of divide the schedule up, to be honest. I mean, I know Stephanie and Charlie have a lot to do with the prime programming during each night. And when I say prime programming, I'm meaning the hours of 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. I guess, isn't that prime? It's been a while, but yeah. So basically, Charlie and Stephanie have a lot of the prime programming, but then the rest of the programmers in the department, we kind of just split up all the days, and it's honestly kind of just what we come up with. And I've been at the network for 17 years, so I have had to think up a lot of ideas. And sometimes, it's like you find yourself maybe reusing one from a while back, but ultimately that's kind of how it works, is we all kind of split it up. So.
And I can say that Charlie and Millie and the programming team, they're always really great at taking suggestions from the rest of the staff. I mean, I've submitted a lot of ideas that have seen the light of day, so it's really gratifying.
Yeah, Charlie knows. I just dropped a whole bunch of ideas on him a couple of weeks ago.
We got to work. Yeah,
yeah.
Giving us some work to do.
See how
I know
all that goes.
Yeah.
But it was funny that when I first came on the network, I was so excited. Like, we should do this and we should do that. And Charlie was like, "Yeah, we did that like 5 years ago. We already done that." But it didn't dampen my enthusiasm.
Good.
No.
You don't want to shut people down. You don't want to, but it's like, oh yeah, we can't just do that.
Yeah, I did that already. Yeah. But also, there's a question here from Dave Sekula, who I'm going to paraphrase this because it ties into something I was thinking about. My experience as a programmer, theatrically, and I've been doing it for 20 years now, more than 20 years. It's interesting to note that when I started out, I had this attitude of I have to find stuff and program things that nobody else is programming. And I very quickly learned that it all kind of goes in cycles, that you never stray too far from the classics and the films that will draw an audience. So some people, the hardcore, would say to me, "Are you going to show Double Indemnity again?" And I would say, I showed it 6 years ago, and that person who was 13 years old 6 years ago is now 19 and will actually understand Double Indemnity now. And so these films, it pays to, recycle the films. And I know that I do get criticism from people saying, you're showing certain titles too often. But what's your response to that? Because I certainly don't feel that way. I always think of it in terms of, this is the first time somebody's going to be seeing this movie.
Can I take that question, actually?
You certainly may, Millie.
Okay. Thank you. To me, I feel like 6 years between an airing is a really long time in my mind.
God, yeah.
Especially when you consider that there are networks all along the cable spectrum that are playing the same movie like all day, like 4 times a day. So I always say it's like, for me, I get this a lot, I think, with Underground 2, where people think, oh, you just played that. But then if you actually go back into, the database and find out when you played it, it was only like, people will say, oh, you played it so recently, but it was like 3 years ago, which again is a very long time. So I personally think, we could be rerunning them a lot more often. I think we do a pretty good job of spacing things out. And plus, yeah, people like to see movies. I mean, sometimes they don't catch them. And, if it's on the schedule, even the next month, it will be new to somebody.
Mm-hmm. Hey,
And I
Millie,
think
here's
just
a
like we talked
question
about
that
balance with. Oh, sorry.
No,
I was gonna
go
say
right ahead,
there's
Sean.
We talked about balance before of eras and what eras, but it's also true for big movies versus obscurities and trying to get that right balance. You want to have both. It's like the film festival. We try every year. Yeah, you want to see these big movies. You don't want to ignore them, but boy, some people might be in the mood to discover something new or that they'd never heard of before. And it's really trying to use the real estate you have to give both of those, within what the time that you have.
Yeah, exactly. No, I feel that way because when I program Noir Alley, I'd really try to maintain that balance between the Touch of Evils and the Double Indemnities and the Third Man, and then stuff that nobody has ever heard of. And while the really, really hardcore fans are only looking for that obscurity, they want to see Guilty Bystander with Zachary Scott, which will be a TCM premiere, in a month or two. But the reality is, it's those big ticket films that draw the big audience. I mean, that's what gets the big reaction on social media, and because the thing that people need to understand, and boy, I learned this from doing theatrical shows, is it's the big movies that get people to bring other people in to watch them. It's like, you mean you've never seen Touch of Evil? Oh my God. And then they get a group together to watch Touch of Evil, and then you're creating new fans. As opposed to the single viewer who says, hey, I've never seen Guilty Bystander. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, Guilty Bystander is not a movie that's going to convert anybody to being a film noir fan, right? I mean, it's definitely worth showing, but it's not a tent revival kind of experience,
The same.
Billy, I have
one more thing. Sorry, the same logic applies to how we approach the film festival as well. I mean, we have so many diehard fans that we can show those obscure movies that people can discover. We also have the big movies, but it's a mix that we're able to do based on the audience, based on who actually comes to the festival. Whereas you look at something like The Cruise, and the majority of what we play are the bread and butter, the big films that everybody knows, everybody has already seen. We do have the ability to slip in an obscurity here and there to introduce people, but it's primarily just the audience that you have in mind.
Mm-hmm. Precisely. Millie, a question just came in from David Krause that touches on something that you and I were talking about recently regarding when films are actually where they're placed in the daily schedule. Like, why is a certain film a 5 p.m. film as opposed to an 11:45 p.m. film? And, if you want to talk about that and specifically cite our upcoming series and how we faced some of those challenges, go right ahead.
Sure. So, there's something that we have on television called Standards and Practices, which basically is a guide for when we can play certain types of content. And at this point, I actually feel like over the years we've gotten a lot more bold, if you will, with playing things earlier. When I first started, it was pretty strict, and I think we're at this point now where we're playing a lot of stuff. But I think it is sort of that thing where if something has a lot of content, that can be cuss words, violence, sexual matters or whatever. We tend to play that stuff kind of later in the evening, and a lot of that is because we don't have a West Coast feed. So anything that plays on the East Coast is playing 3 hours earlier on the West Coast. So, for example, Eddie and I just worked on some programming for a neo-noir festival for July, and a lot of those films were made in the 70s and 80s, and we had to figure out when we could play a lot of them because, do you want to put Body Heat on at, 6 o'clock in the afternoon? Probably not. But it's an interesting challenge. But like I said, I feel like over the years it's gotten a little not easier, but it's things have changed. So
and I noticed it last night because with the festival last night, you started off with West Side Story, followed by Mean Streets, and on the West Coast, Mean Streets was airing right in the heart of prime time, and there is some tough stuff in that film, for the old school TCM audience. But with the neo-noir thing, what was interesting was, from a programming standpoint, I was really determined to try to show the films in chronological order so that people could see the development of the genre from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s. But because of standards and practices, there were films that we just couldn't stick to a chronological order. You had to kind of jump around because there were certain titles that were only going to play after hours, if you will. So it's a challenge, but it's a creative one. It is a creative one. Chuck Pickerel wants to know, he says he really enjoyed the TCM Reframe series and wants to know if the theme will return in the future. What do you think?
We're really happy with it. I mean, I think it did what we wanted. We wanted to have that conversation and talk about the way movies are seen differently now, and that's not to say that there's anything wrong with them. I think every one of those movies that played, I really liked to one degree or another, but just acknowledge that some of them do have issues, or even if not issues, just things that are culturally different. So we're talking about how we can do something similar without doing the exact same thing. I mean, at some point, you're going to run out of the. It's important that the big movies you use the big movies for something like that, because those are the ones that have the frame of reference to begin with, and then to reframe them, it really works. You kind of don't want to have the same conversation over and over. I do think, of course, there's a lot we can do in order to forward the cultural conversation in that same way. Maybe without doing explicitly the exact same festival with just different movies. And so we're talking a lot about that right now. What's the best way to do that?
Great, thanks. Bonnie Pop has a question for Scott. She wants to know, how do you, in all caps, begin to curate the annual festival? I mean, I guess she means, how do you decide on a theme? And obviously she's asking about picking stars, and that's always a challenge. But how does the process start for you, Scott?
The process starts for Charlie and Stephanie and myself with just sharing ideas via email, and then we get together for a conference or a summit, if you will, usually in Los Angeles, where we just bang out ideas of what we want to achieve in terms of what the theme is, and what the big titles, what the big restorations and the big anniversaries are. And then we work with the talent team under Susana Cepeda to come up with who the big tributes will be that year. And as we build, and we don't necessarily have the building blocks all in place at the beginning of the season, or of the year, of the cycle, I should say. but as we proceed, things start to fall into place. But at the outset, we always have a theme, and we always have a general idea of the kinds of movies, not just the kinds, but a few select titles that we know we want to have to support what the theme will be. And we always take suggestions from people, and we loved it. We get a lot of great ideas from fans, but especially from our friends and our partners in the various archives in the studios. People like Rita Belda at Sony, Sean Belston at Fox, of course now Disney. They have so many ideas in terms of what the films they have in their own archives that they've done restoration work on that we could possibly premiere at the festival. And it's not just good for us in terms of showing something that's new and recently restored, but it shows off their work, which is of paramount importance for us, especially as we work with these partners. And I mean, Eddie, you do the same thing with the work that you do with the Film Noir Foundation. So, so that's generally how it begins, and it just sort of proceeds from there. It's an operation akin to D-Day. That encompasses so many people.
Well, speaking of paramount importance, Scott, I want to add Andrea Callis to that list of key archivists that we work with, and
absolutely, yeah. There's so many.
And so many. I know I'm not including some. And then I want to reiterate what you said about the talent department, because a lot does flow from them too, and especially if they'll say, hey, I just talked to somebody's agent, and whatever. If George Clooney really wants to come, and okay, well, George Clooney wants to come, we'll figure out a way to get a George Clooney movie. So sometimes there's a back and forth with talent as well, quite a bit.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we're drawing to the close here, but one last question from Felicity. She says, "Is there a big fish you haven't been able to license yet that you can share with us, like a movie that is just like, oh man, we got to get this thing, and just haven't been able to land it yet"? Anybody have one?
Well, I can say there are several, and go ahead, Scott. I want to hear what you go ahead.
I just watched on my back porch. I have COVID. One of the bright spots of COVID was I got a projector and started beaming movies off the back of my house. It's my favorite spot in the world, other than a movie theater. So I watched a DVD that I bought at Amoeba Music in L.A. of a 1941 film called Hell's a Poppin'. And I think it's actually a bootleg, because I don't think it has an official DVD release. This movie was, I tweeted about it. I said, if Otto, the autopilot blow-up doll from Airplane, invented a time machine, went back in time to the 1930s and remade Airplane with the Marx Brothers and Tex Avery, you would be approaching what Hell's a Poppin' is all about. It is the most bonkers comedy I've ever seen, and it is tied up in limbo hell because I think of music rights, and it is such a shame, because this movie is just, anybody who sees it would redefine what classic Hollywood comedy is all about. I mean, it is just hysterical, and you should try to find it if you can. But it's one of those movies I would love to show at the festival or on the channel, but I don't know if it'll ever happen anytime soon.
Well, now you've got everybody curious. Okay, you guys don't get to answer that question because we're now set for our final City One Big Question. This is what we do in all these panels. City is going to ask one big question. And that question today, for all of you, is who is someone you would love to program as a star of the month, but you haven't done it yet? And why haven't you done it yet? Okay, Millie, you go first. Who would you like to program as a star of the month?
Okay, I think I would love, I don't think we've done him yet. In fact, I know we haven't. My choice is Dana Andrews. I would love to do him as Star of the Month, but I think part of the reason is because a lot of the movies come from studios that we don't do a ton of business with. So I don't know if Charlie wants to speak more to that. That might cover a lot of bases if he did.
That's one studio, because he made most of his movies at one studio.
Yeah. No, that's right, and so it's really because my answer is going to be similar, but for similar reason. But Fox it's not we have a great deal with Fox, but we don't get just unlimited access at the same time to all of the movies, and that's where the star of the month you really want to capture a big part of their filmography, and it's hard to do it all at the same time.
And Charlie, is there a performer that you've
so actually for a similar reason, I would say because
my cat just knocked over my glass. My cat just knocked over my glass, and I'm barefooted, so I'm going to have to do some tiptoeing.
It's going to get violent in here. Okay, but I still want to hear Charlie's answer. I want Charlie's answer.
All right. So my answer is also due to, partly because a lot of her career was at Fox, but then key titles also from Universal, Rear Window, and That Touch of Me, and Pillow Talk, and then also key titles from MGM like Birdman of Alcatraz. So getting enough Thelma Ritter films at the same time, I think, is is really a challenge. But she's somebody, a character actress, but somebody that I think would be awesome to feature as a star of the month at some point. And but it's putting those puzzle pieces together is a real challenge.
Right. And I know TCM superfan Christy Putnam has a biography coming out on Thelma Ritter, and that would be very nice to somehow tie that all together. But yes, it is a challenge. Scott, how about you? Now that your feet are bleeding,
first of all, I cannot wait to read that book by Christy Putnam on Thelma Ritter. She's needed a biography for a long time. My iMessaging is getting blown up by people sending me gifts of cats. So there you go. My dream star of the month is another Fox star, actually, but we couldn't do him for a different reason. That's Tom Mix. Tom Mix was he was one of the biggest movie stars in the 1920s. World famous, on par with Chaplin and Pickford. And unfortunately, because so many of the films that he made at Fox, so many of them were lost in the infamous Fox Vault Fire of 1937, I believe. And so much of his output is gone, is just lost forever. Now, and the films that do survive are largely in need of preservation. And we did get a chance to show two of his films in 2019, the Great K&A Train Robbery and The Outlaws of Red River. The Red River was actually preserved by MoMA. And, but we can't make a star of the month out of just, a handful of films that have been restored. So, a lot of it has to depend on just what's available. And unfortunately, I don't think there's enough out there of Tom Mix.
Yeah, interesting. I think mine would be Ella Raines. Has Ella Raines ever been a star of the month? I don't. No. See, I love Ella Raines because to me she is because being the noir guy, people have this idea that women in film noir are either the good girl or the femme fatale, and Ella Raines was neither of those. She was like this wonderful, self-possessed 40s woman who made just a string of extraordinary movies, and she's so modern in all of them, and I don't think people know her films well enough. So I would love to see Ella Raines as a star of the month. I'm not exactly sure that there's enough films because at a certain point she just retired from the business. And I don't know if there are enough movies to make her a star of the month, but maybe she could have a day or something. So that would be my pick. Okay, there was a question earlier? Did you guys want to answer that about the big fish that you haven't been able to land? I think only one of you answered that. Anybody else have an idea about a title? Yeah.
I'm going to give two quick titles. One, Underlying Rights, Letty Linton. I haven't been able to play that early. Joan Crawford. Another one is Because It's Just Always Tied Up, and everyone wants us to play the best Christmas movies, and we want to play the best Christmas movies. But It's a Wonderful Life is tied up with NBC. They licensed it, for forever for their one play a year. Good for them, but that means we don't get to play it. So those are my two.
Okay, fantastic. And I would throw on that. Millie, do you have one?
Oh, that's my answer too. It's a Wonderful Life. We get requests for it literally every year. So
it's funny. And mine would be another Christmas movie that has fallen off the radar, which is Christmas Holiday, Deanna Durbin movie made in 1944. That, despite the title, is a hardcore film noir movie, and the studio that produced it has lost the rights, and they've reverted back to the estate of Somerset Maugham, the underlying literary rights are with the estate of W. Somerset Maugham, and it's kind of, it's a mess. So I don't know when that movie could be shown, for broadcast. I can't even show it theatrically any longer, so that's unfortunate. Anyway. Hey, I want to thank all of you guys. Charlie Tabish, Millie DeCherico, Scott McGee, our panelists were absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. I thank everybody who asked these terrific questions. We had so many. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. But really, greatly appreciate your time today. But beyond that, appreciate all the effort you put in bringing all these films to the fans. You guys do an absolutely spectacular job. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie.
thanks.
Okay, I was waiting for that. Okay, what's the big response there? All right, very good. And I thank, I thank our panelists, I thank all the viewers, and I thank City for their continued sponsorship. Like I said, since 2013, they have been the official card of the TCM Film Festival and the sponsors of Club TCM, which you should come back and visit tomorrow, because the Club TCM event tomorrow will be Sight and Sound Makers, a chat with Ben Burt and Craig Barron, who are always spectacular hits at the TCM Festival, and our buddy Scott McGee will be hosting them for that event. So thanks very much for tuning in today. Thank you for all the questions, and once again, I thank our panelists. Enjoy the rest of the festival.